The day I stopped being who they wanted and started being myself wasn't an overnight thing. It wasn't some cinematic revelation where the world suddenly makes sense and everything falls into place. Nah, it was messy, confusing, and full of moments where I questioned everything. But let me tell you, it was the day everything changed. For as long as I could remember, I had been living according to a script written by someone else. Parents, teachers, friends, society. It seemed like everyone had a say in who I should be and what I should want. Be a doctor, they said. Get good grades, they said. Dress like this, talk like that. Don't rock the boat. Make sure you're liked. And the list went on and on. I played along, trying to be the person they expected, wearing the masks they handed me. Because who was I to argue? I mean, they must know better, right? But then there was this moment, or rather, a series of small moments that built up like a slow burning fire. It started with this subtle nagging feeling that something was off. Like when you're at a party and everyone's laughing, but you're just staring at the drinks, thinking, is this it? Is this what life is supposed to be? I shrugged it off at first, told myself I was just overthinking it, that everyone feels lost sometimes. But it didn't stop. That feeling started showing up more often, staying a bit longer each time. I'd be sitting at work, staring at spreadsheets or whatever mundane task was in front of me, and that voice in my head would whisper, "Whose life are you living?" I'd dismiss it, tell myself it was just fatigue, but deep down, I knew that voice was right. It's funny, isn't it? We spend so much of our lives tuning out that inner voice because it dares to challenge the status quo we've built our lives around. The real turning point, though, was the day I found myself staring in the mirror, not recognizing the person looking back at me. It wasn't just about the dark circles under my eyes or the tired expression. It was the realization that I didn't know who I was outside of other people's expectations. I felt like an actor who'd forgotten his lines in the middle of a play, only this play was my life, and I was so far into the script that improvising felt impossible. That moment didn't make everything clear, but it did start a chain reaction. I started to question everything. Why did I dress the way I did? Did I really like those clothes? Or was I just trying to fit into some image? Why was I working a job that sucked the soul out of me? Why did I say yes to things I hated doing? Each question led to another, and with each answer, a layer of the life I'd been living started to peel away. Of course, change didn't come without resistance. People don't like when you break the mold they've put you in. They act shocked, offended even, as if your growth is a betrayal of the version of you they're comfortable with. I remember the first time I said no to something I would have normally agreed to. The looks I got were a mix of confusion and annoyance, as if I'd broken some unspoken contract. "Come on, man, you've always been up for this. What's changed?" they'd ask, with that hint of disbelief that stings just a little. I have, I wanted to say, but at first I didn't. I just shrugged, made up excuses, anything to avoid confrontation while I tried to figure out how to own this new version of myself. It wasn't easy. There were nights when I lay awake, wondering if I'd made a huge mistake, wondering if I was throwing away years of effort and stability for some intangible sense of authenticity. But here's the thing about living for other people. It's exhausting. And once you get a taste of living for yourself, even if it's just a little, going back feels unbearable. So I kept pushing. I started doing more things I actually enjoyed, even if they seemed pointless or silly. I picked up hobbies I'd abandoned long ago, spent more time alone figuring out what I actually liked and who I wanted to be. I stopped apologizing for my choices, even when the doubt crept in. Especially then, It's wild how people start to notice when you're no longer playing the part they assigned to you. Some support you, even envy you for having the guts to break free. Others pull away, uncomfortable with the shift in dynamics. I lost some friends, or maybe they were never really friends, just people who liked the version of me that was easy to be around, easy to predict. It hurt, but it also felt freeing. I remember one conversation in particular with an old friend who couldn't wrap their head around why I'd changed. They said, "You're not the person I used to know." And for the first time, that felt like a compliment. "I know," I replied, smiling because I wasn't that person anymore, and I didn't want to be. The more I embraced who I really was, the clearer everything became. I started to see the things I once considered failures as necessary stepping stones. The opinions that used to weigh me down started to matter less and less. Sure, it still stung sometimes when people judged me or talked behind my back, but their words felt distant, almost irrelevant, compared to the peace I was beginning to find in my own skin. One of the biggest lessons I learned during this shift was that it's okay to be misunderstood. Not everyone is going to get it, and that's fine. The goal isn't to make everyone understand you. It's to understand yourself enough that their misunderstandings don't shake you. That realization hit me like a bolt of lightning one day when I was out on a solo hike. The kind of thing I used to think was boring or weird. The silence, the fresh air, the sheer simplicity of just being. It was like meeting myself for the first time, away from the noise and the expectations. There's a kind of magic that happens when you stop living for others and start living for yourself. It doesn't mean you become selfish or stop caring about the people you love. If anything, I found I could love them better, more honestly. I wasn't saying yes out of obligation or resentment anymore. I was there because I wanted to be, and that made all the difference. Of course, there were practical challenges, too. The job that drained me had to go, and with that came financial instability and a lot of "I told you so" looks. But I'd rather struggle for a bit and build a life that feels right than stay comfortable in a life that feels wrong. It's cliché, but true. Growth happens outside of your comfort zone. And leaving that job was my first big leap. Starting over wasn't easy, but it was worth it. I picked up freelance work, found gigs that allowed me to be creative, work that felt more aligned with who I was becoming. It didn't pay as well at first, but it didn't matter. The peace of mind was priceless. It was like a fog had lifted, and I could finally see where I was going, even if the path was still rocky and uncertain. What surprised me most was how my relationships changed. Some drifted away, but the ones that stayed grew deeper. They saw me, really saw me, probably for the first time. The conversations felt more genuine, more meaningful. I didn't have to pretend or play a role anymore, and that authenticity invited the same from others. And here's the kicker. The day I stopped being who they wanted and became myself, I didn't just find freedom. I found a new kind of strength, one that wasn't based on approval or external validation, but rooted in knowing who I am and what I stand for. It didn't mean I had it all figured out, or that I never faced doubt again. Far from it. But the doubt didn't control me anymore. It became part of the journey, not the thing that stopped it. It's easy to think that choosing yourself is selfish, that it means turning your back on everyone else. But in reality, it's the opposite. The more I became myself, the more I was able to show up for others in a real way. No more pretending, no more hiding behind masks that didn't fit. And that, more than anything, made me realize that I hadn't lost anything. I'd gained everything. So, if you're at that point where you're questioning whether it's worth it to step away from what others want you to be, let me tell you, it is. It's terrifying, unpredictable, and it'll shake up your life in ways you can't imagine. But it's also liberating, empowering, and ultimately, it's the only way to find out who you really are. Because at the end of the day, there's nothing more fulfilling than looking in the mirror and recognizing the person staring back at you. Not the version molded by everyone else's expectations, but the raw, imperfect, authentic you. And that's worth every moment of doubt, every uncomfortable conversation, and every leap into the unknown.